Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of SmoothBrainEDH, where we make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. This week's video was chosen by our supporters over on Patreon through our monthly polls. So this week's theme is Memory Lane. Our four players were tasked with either finding their oldest deck list, or remembering their oldest deck and recreating it as best as they can. So let's hop right into it and see what everyone brought. First up is Jason on Tariel, Reckoner of Souls. You've all probably seen his pretty powerful Kali of the Vast deck on the channel before. This is pretty much his prototype of Kalia, so expect a lot of big angels, demons, and dragons. He'll keep an opening hand of Plains, Shizo, Isolated Chapel, Orzhov Ballistica, Rakdos Signet, Phyrexian Arena, and Utter End. Up next is Caden on the Zombie Tribal Commander of Gisa and Geralf. It's pretty obvious what this deck's all about. It wants to flood the board with zombies, whether that be from his hand or from the graveyard. And his opening hand contains an Island, Urborg, Bojuka Bog, Grave Pact, Carrion Feeder, Diregraph Colossus, and Diregraph Captain. Next in the turn order is Chandler on Atarka, World Render. A lot of new players tend to gravitate towards stompy tribal decks, and Chandler is no exception. He's hoping to kill all of his opponents with massive dragons in the air. His opening hand has 2 forests, 2 mountains, Vandal Blast, Rishkar's Expertise, and Sakura Tribe Builder. And now, last but not least, we have Ethan on Breya, Ethereum Shaper. Ethan's always been a huge fan of artifacts in Magic, so when he first started in Commander, he had to play Breya. And what better way to win than through fun combo shenanigans? He'll keep an opening hand of Island, Mountain, Prairie Stream, Nim Deathmantle, Basalt Monolith, Supreme Verdict, and Baleful Strix. We're about to hop right into the gameplay, but before we do, leave us a comment down below letting us know who you think is going to win. And while you're down there, don't forget to check out all our links in the description. We've got a second channel where we post our podcast, links to our Patreon, links to our Discord, you name it. We've even got affiliate links, and our first one is Dragon Shield. So if you're looking to pick up any high quality Magic products such as playmats, deck boxes, or sleeves, be sure to check out our link. We've also got a link to our Inked Gaming referral page, so if you're looking to make any custom playmats or anything of the sort, be sure to check them out as well. But that is enough talk, let's hop right into the gameplay. Caden wins the die roll and he starts off with Urborg into Carrion Feeder. The turn is then passed and Chandler just plays a forest and passes to Ethan, who will play a tapped Prairie Stream and then pass to Jason, who plays a Plains, and then the turn will be passed back to Caden, who will play an Evolving Swamp, and then he'll swing for 1 at Ethan. He'll then pass the turn to Chandler, who will play a Mountain as land for turn, and then he'll tap for 2 and cast Sack Daddy. The turn is then passed, and then Ethan will start off with an Island, and then he'll tap for 2, a blue and a black because Urborg is out, and he'll cast Baleful Strix, and he'll draw a card upon ETB. The turn is then passed to Jason, who will start off with an Isolated Chapel. He'll then tap for 2 and cast Rakdos Signet, and then pass the turn to Caden, who fetches with Evolving Wilds on end step for an Island. He'll then play another Island on his turn, and then he'll drop Diregraph Captain. After this, he'll move to combat and swing for 2 at Jason, and then he'll pass the turn to Chandler, who will sacrifice Sack Daddy on end step for another forest. He'll then move to his turn and play a Mountain as land for turn. Unfortunately, he's only drawn big mana spells, so he just has to pass to Ethan, who will play a Mountain as land for turn, and then he'll tap for 3 and cast Basalt Monolith. The turn is then passed to Jason, who will immediately drop his Phyrexian Arena, and then he'll play Orzhov Basilica, bouncing Plains to his hand, and then he'll pass the turn to Caden, who will start off by casting Diregraph Colossus. After this, he moves to combat and swings for 2 at Ethan, who will chump with his Baleful Strix, and the Captain trigger is pointed at Ethan. Caden will then play a Bojuka Bog as land for turn, and of course his target is Ethan. Remember kids, always bog Ethan. The turn is then passed to Chandler, who plays another forest, and then he'll tap for 4 and cast Frontier Siege. When he enters, he'll choose Khans to get more mana. The turn is then passed to Ethan, who will start off by playing a Swamp, and then he'll tap for 5 mana and cast a Gilded Lotus. Then he'll tap for 2 and cast Nim's Deathmantle. The turn is then passed to Jason, who has a Phyrexian Arena trigger, and then he'll replay his Plains. He'll then tap for 2 and cast Vindicate on the Nim's Deathmantle. It resolves, and then the turn is passed to Caden, who starts off with a Drowned Catacomb, and then he'll tap for 4 and cast Gisa and Geralf. He has to mill 4 cards, and those cards are Sidisi Undead Vizier, Recall, and 2 lands. He'll then recast his Carrion Feeder from his graveyard, and there's a Diregraph Colossus trigger. He'll then move to combat and swing for 5 at Chandler, who just has to take it. And then the turn is passed to Chandler, who will make 2 green mana on his first main phase, and then he'll cast Balefire Dragon. He'll then pass the turn to Ethan, who untaps his Monolith on end step, and then he'll cast Duretti Scrap Savant. He'll uptick him to discard a Faith's Reward and draw a card. He'll then play a Bloodstained Mire, and then tap for 4 and drop Supreme Verdict. And Caden will sacrifice everything except his Diagraph Captain to Carrion Feeder, causing Ethan to lose 2 life, and then when the verdict resolves, he'll have Ethan lose 1 more life. He'll then fetch with his Bloodstained Mire for a Sunken Hollow, and then he'll pass the turn to Jason. Arena Trigger, and then he'll play Shizo and pass to Caden, who will immediately tap for 5 and cast Stitcher Geralf. He'll then pass the turn to Chandler, who will make another 2 green mana on his first main phase, and he'll immediately use that mana to cast Rampant Growth, fighting another mountain to the battlefield. He'll then move to his second main phase and add another 2 green mana to his pool, and then he'll cast Ryusei, the Falling Star. The turn is then passed, and Jason will utter End Duretti on end step, and Ethan will respond by untapping Basalt Monolith, and then Duretti is exiled. Now on Ethan's turn, he'll start off with a Spire of Industry, and then he'll cast a War of Invention where X is equal to 1, and he'll have 2 colorless mana floating. He nabs himself a Skull Clamp, and then he'll cast Breya, who makes him 2 Thopters upon ETB. Ethan will then attempt to clamp one of the Thopters, but Chandler has a response, and he'll Lightning Bolt the target. It'll resolve, but Ethan still has another Thopter and another floating mana, so he'll clamp that one and draw 2. He'll then cast Mere Retriever, and then pass the turn to Jason. Arena Trigger, and then he'll play Vault of the Archangel as land for turn. He'll then cast Swiftfoot Boots, and then the turn is passed to Caden, who will drop a Buried Alive. This finds him Withered Wretch, Gravecrawler, and Zombie Master to the graveyard. And then he'll pass the turn to Chandler, who gets 2 green mana on his main phase, and then he'll play another Forest, and then tap for an additional 4 to cast Rishkar's Expertise. This allows him to draw 5 cards and then cast a Storm Breath Dragon. After this, he'll move to combat and swing for 4 in the air at Caden and 5 in the air at Ethan. After combat, Chandler will get an additional 2 green mana, and then he'll tap for 3 more to overload a Vandal Blast. It'll resolve, and a Mere Retriever trigger is put on the stack, and Ethan puts Skull Clamp back to his hand. The turn is then passed, and Ethan will start off with a basic Plains. He'll then cast a Chromatic Lantern, and then Skull Clamp again. He'll then pass the turn to Jason, who has another Arena Trigger in his upkeep. He'll then tap for 3 and cast a Sword of Fire and Ice. He'll then play a Temple of Triumph and scry 1 to the bottom. And then the turn is passed to Caden, who will start off with a Relentless Dead. And then he'll pay 3 mana and activate Geralf. Everyone mills 3 cards, and then Caden will exile Kokusho from Jason's graveyard and Shieldred from his own to make an 11/11 zombie. Also, just FYI, Ethan also mills a Darksteel Forge, because that might be important later. He'll then pass the turn to Chandler, who gets another 2 green mana on his first main, and then he'll play another Forest. With that 2 green mana, he'll cast a Swiftfoot Boots, and then he'll tap for 7 mana and cast his commander, Atarka, World Render. And then with his last mana, he will attempt to equip Swiftfoot Boots to her. Jason, however, decides to respond by casting Mortify, blowing up Atarka before she can get Hexproof. It resolves, and then Chandler will move to combat and swing for 4 in the air at Ethan, and then 5 in the air at Jason, and they both just have to take it. The turn is then passed to Ethan, who will just immediately recast Breya. When she ETBs, he'll make his 2 Thopters, and he'll immediately Skull Clamp 1 to draw 2 cards. He'll then repeat this process, drawing an additional 2, and then he'll play a tapped Hollowed Fountain and pass the turn to Jason. Arena Trigger on upkeep, and then he'll immediately tap for 7 mana and cast Tariel. The turn is then passed to Caden, and he will start off by tapping for 2 and casting Talisman of Dominance. He'll then move to combat and swing for 11 at Ethan, who thinks long and hard and decides to jump block with Breya. Post-combat, Caden will activate Geralf again, causing everybody to mill 3 cards. And he'll make another 11/11 after exiling Steel Hellkite and Chandler's Xenagos God of Revels. The only other notable thing that is milled is Ethan's Voltaic Key. The turn is then passed to Chandler, who will take his 2 green mana and then tap for an additional 3 to cast Asceticism. He'll then just pass the turn, and Ethan starts off his turn by tapping for 2 and casting a Demonic Tutor. He'll search his library and then immediately cast the card he found, which is Open the Vaults. This brings all artifacts and enchantments from all graveyards back to the battlefield, including Ethan's Darksteel Forge. And then to add insult to injury, Ethan will cast Oblivion Stone. And then using Voltaic Key Gilded Lotus shenanigans, Ethan is able to blow up the Oblivion Stone in the same turn. This will blow up all non-land permanents, except Ethan has Darksteel Forge out, so it'll blow up all of his opponent's non-land permanents. Chandler pays twice for regeneration, saving his creatures, but everything else is gone. And Caden pays to Relentless Dead. Ethan will then pay 1 to equip Skull Clamp to his Mere Retriever, drawing 2 cards and returning Oblivion Stone back to his hand. The turn is then passed to Jason, who will just cast a Twilight Shepherd, and then pass the turn to Caden, who will play another island, then recast his commander and mill 4 cards. The turn is then passed to Chandler, who will play another Forest as land for turn. He'll then tap for 7 mana and activate Monstrosity on his Storm Breath Dragon. This will put 3+1/+1 counters on it, and then Ethan will have to take 6 damage, Jason 7, and Caden 4. Chandler will then move to combat and hit Ethan for 12, and then pass the turn. Ethan will start by using Voltaic Key shenanigans to tap for 8 mana and recast Breya, and this will get him 2 more Thopters. He'll then cast Storm the Vault, and then Oblivion Stone. He'll then move to his end step, and Storm the Vault will definitely transform. The turn is now passed to Jason, who will just swing in the air at Ethan, who blocks with an indestructible Thopter. And then Jason will cast Radiant Archangel. The turn is then passed to Caden, and he'll start off with another Swamp. And then he'll recast Relentless Dead, and then Gravecrawler from his graveyard. After this, he'll use Gisa and Geralf to cast Withered Wretch, and then he'll pay 1 to it to exile Mirror Retriever from Ethan's graveyard. The turn is then passed to Chandler, who will immediately drop a Thundermaw Hellkite. All of his opponent's creatures with flying are pink for 1 and tapped, so then he'll move to combat and full swing at Ethan. Of course, Ethan has a response though, and he'll tap his Vault for 11 blue mana, and he'll use 5 of it to blow up O-Stone again. And then with the ability on the stack, Caden will pay 1 to Withered Wretch to exile it. Ethan also pays to untap his Monolith, and then Chandler casts Rada Heir to Keld. Then a Lightning Greaves, and he'll immediately equip her with it. The turn is then passed to Ethan, who starts off with a Mycosynth Lattice. And thanks to it, Ethan is able to tap his Vault for 21 blue mana, and he's able to spend it as if it's any color. And he'll start by spending 1 to Skullclamp a Thopter. And then he'll do it again. And then he casts Enlightened Tutor. This allows him to find KCI to the top of his library, and then he equips Breya with Skullclamp, and then activates her ability, sacrificing her and a land, which is an artifact, to gain 5 life. He'll then draw 2 cards off Skullclamp, and then he'll pay the 4 mana to Nim's Deathmantle to return Breya to the battlefield, and he'll get 2 more Thopters. He'll then cast KCI, and then an Eldrazi Displacer, and this will allow Ethan to start a combo that will kill the entire table. With Breya, Eldrazi Displacer, and KCI, Ethan can sacrifice 2 Thopters to make 4 colorless mana, and then he can pay 3 to Eldrazi Displacer to flicker Breya again to make 2 more Thopters. This nets him 1 colorless mana every time he does it. So let's say he makes 1,000,000 mana. He can then flicker Breya, say 100,000 times to make 200,000 Thopters, and then he can use the rest of his mana to sacrifice all those Thopters and activate Breya to drain out all of his opponents. And there's no responses at the table, so Ethan will win here. Well everyone, there you have it. As it turns out, Breya Artifacts is an insanely good deck. The rest of the table was able to hit Ethan pretty low, but in the end, he pulled out the combo and won. Let us know what you guys thought in the comments below. And while you're down there, don't forget to check out all those links we post for you. Remember, this video was the winner of our Patreon poll last month, so if you want to help us decide what kind of content we make in the future, be sure to join. We've also got all the deck lists down there as well if you want to see what kind of idiots we were several years ago. But that's enough talk for today, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a smooth day, and I'll see you next week.